Secrets buried in the criminal underworld never truly stay dead. When Chicago's most feared syndicate boss strolls through a sunlit park with his high society fiancée, he expects a mundane afternoon of PR. Instead, he locks eyes with the only woman he ever loved pushing a triple stroller. Lorenzo Bianchi did not like the cold, and he despised the vulnerability of open spaces. Yet, here he was, walking along the winding, tree-lined paths of Lincoln Park on a brisk Tuesday afternoon. The autumn leaves were a brilliant, bleeding crimson, matching the violence that had painted Lorenzo's rise to the head of the Bianchi crime family over the last 4 years. Beside him walked Chloe Harrison. She was the picture of old money perfection. A tailored cashmere coat, impeccable blonde waves, and a diamond on her left ring finger that cost more than most residential blocks in the city. Chloe was the daughter of State Senator William Harrison, a man whose political influence was the exact bleach Lorenzo needed to launder his syndicate's reputation. Their engagement wasn't a romance. It was a heavily negotiated treaty. She got the unlimited wealth and raw power of the Bianchi empire, and he got the keys to legitimate corporate America. My father wants to finalize the guest list by Friday. Lorenzo, Chloe murmured. Her arm looped gracefully through his. She didn't look at him when she spoke, her eyes scanning the park to ensure they were being seen by the right kind of people. We're thinking 500 guests. The mayor has already RSVP'd. Whatever your father thinks is best, Lorenzo replied, his voice a low, gravelly baritone that commanded immediate authority. He adjusted the lapels of his charcoal wool overcoat. 10 yards ahead, his lead enforcer, a hulking man named Silas, walked with a calculated casualness, his eyes scanning every jogger, every cyclist, every shadow. 10 yards behind, 2 more armed men shadowed their steps. Lorenzo's mind wasn't on the wedding. It rarely was. His thoughts, as they often did when the silence of the city crept in, drifted back to a dingy, warm apartment 4 years ago. He thought of the smell of cheap vanilla candles and the sound of a genuine, breathless laugh. He thought of Sophia. Sophia Bennett had been a civilian, a fiercely independent nurse who had patched him up in an emergency room after a hunting accident that left him with a bullet in his shoulder. She hadn't known who he was at first. When she found out, she hadn't cared. For a year, she was his sanctuary. But the criminal underworld is a jealous mistress. When the rival Costello family declared war, they started targeting family members. Lorenzo had done the only thing he could to keep her alive. He broke her heart. He orchestrated a cruel, calculated fight, told her she was a distraction, and threw her out of his life. He put a covert detail on her for a month to ensure she was safe, and then she packed up and vanished from Chicago entirely. He told himself it was for the best. He told himself the hollow ache in his chest would fade. It never did. Lorenzo, are you even listening to me? Chloe's sharp tone snapped him back to the present. I heard you, Chloe. 500 guests. The mayor. It's fine. You could pretend to be excited, she huffed, pulling her coat tighter. This is the society event of the decade. Lorenzo stopped walking. He was about to offer a placating, empty apology when his breath caught in his throat. It felt as if all the oxygen had been vacuumed out of the park. 50 feet to their left, near the edge of the duck pond, a woman was struggling with a massive, unwieldy piece of machinery. It was a triple stroller, wide and cumbersome, its wheels caught in the thick autumn mud. The woman had her back to him. She was wearing a faded olive-green utility jacket, her dark hair pulled up into a messy, chaotic bun that was coming undone in the wind. She was wrestling with the stroller, muttering something under her breath, completely oblivious to the apex predator staring at her from the paved path. It couldn't be. Lorenzo's heart, an organ he had trained to beat at a slow, icy rhythm, regardless of the danger, began to hammer against his ribs like a war drum. Suddenly, one of the toddlers in the stroller let out a high-pitched wail, dropping a stuffed bear into the mud. The woman sighed, a sound that carried across the crisp air, and turned in profile to bend down and retrieve it. The world stopped spinning. The ambient noise of the city, the distant sirens, the rustling leaves, the chatter of passing pedestrians faded into an absolute, ringing silence. It was Sophia. She looked tired. There were shadows under her eyes, and her cheekbones were sharper than he remembered, but it was unmistakably her. The soft curve of her jaw, the stubborn set of her lips, the constellation of faint freckles across her nose. Lorenzo took a step forward, completely forgetting the woman clinging to his arm. "Lorenzo? Where are you going?" "The car is this way," Chloe said, her voice laced with confusion. Lorenzo didn't answer. He didn't even hear her. He was already moving across the grass, his long strides eating up the distance between them. Silas, sensing the sudden shift in his boss's demeanor, instantly reached into his jacket, his eyes darting to the woman, trying to assess the threat. "Stand down, Silas," Lorenzo barked without looking back, a command that froze the bodyguard in his tracks. As he drew closer, the details of the stroller came into horrifying, paralyzing focus. 3 children. They looked to be around 3 years old. 2 boys and a girl. Sophia picked up the muddy bear and stood up, wiping her forehead with the back of her wrist. She turned to place the toy in the stroller's basket, and as she straightened, her eyes met his. The color instantly drained from Sophia's face. The muddy stuffed bear slipped from her fingers, tumbling back to the ground. She took a staggering step backward, her hands instinctively flying out to grip the handles of the stroller as if it were a shield. "Hello, Sophia," Lorenzo said. His voice was a raw, trembling rasp he barely recognized as his own. Sophia's chest heaved. The sheer, unadulterated terror in her wide amber eyes felt like a serrated blade sliding between Lorenzo's ribs. She looked like a cornered animal, her gaze darting frantically from his face to his broad shoulders, and then to the hulking men in dark suits standing a few yards away. "No," she whispered, the word barely carrying over the wind. "No, no, no." Before Lorenzo could say another word, she abruptly spun the massive stroller around, the wheels protesting as she shoved it forcefully over the uneven grass, desperate to put distance between them. "Sophia, wait!" Lorenzo commanded, his long legs crossing the space in 3 massive strides. He stepped directly into her path, placing one large, leather-gloved hand on the frame of the stroller. The physical contact stopped the carriage dead. "Let me go," she hissed, her voice vibrating with a feral, protective panic he had never seen in her before. She tried to yank the stroller backward, but Lorenzo's grip was like iron. "Don't you dare touch us." "Let me go, Lorenzo!" "Where have you been?" he demanded, the shock wearing off, replaced by a volatile mixture of anger and desperate relief. "You disappeared. 4 years, Sophia. Not a word, not a trace." "You told me to leave," she shot back, tears springing to her eyes, though she refused to let them fall. "You threw me out like trash, remember? You're a liability, Sophia. A stupid distraction." "Your exact words." Lorenzo flinched. The memory of that night tasted like ash in his mouth. "I lied. I did it to keep you safe from the Costellos. I pushed you away so they wouldn't use you against me." Sophia let out a harsh, bitter laugh that held zero humor. "Safe? You think leaving me completely alone, heartbroken, and completely vulnerable made me safe?" While she spoke, Lorenzo's eyes inevitably drifted downward. He couldn't stop himself. The 3 toddlers were staring up at him. The little girl on the left had a mop of chaotic dark curls and her mother's amber eyes. But the 2 boys... Lorenzo felt the blood freeze in his veins. The boy in the middle was scowling at him, an expression of childish defiance that mirrored Lorenzo's own trademark glare so perfectly it was terrifying. The boy on the right had piercing, steel-gray eyes. Lorenzo's eyes, looking at the children, was like staring into a funhouse mirror of his own genetics. A heavy, suffocating weight settled on his chest. He did the math in his head. 4 years ago. 3-year-old toddlers. "Sophia," Lorenzo breathed, his voice dropping to a dangerous, lethal whisper. "Whose children are these?" Sophia's knuckles turned white on the stroller's handle. She lifted her chin, her whole body trembling with a mixture of fear and absolute defiance. "They are mine. They are none of your business." "Do not lie to me." Lorenzo stepped closer, his imposing frame casting a shadow over her and the stroller. "I can see my own face staring back at me. I have 3 children? You hid my children from me?" "I protected my children from a monster," Sophia screamed, no longer caring who heard her. "A week after you threw me out, a car bomb went off outside your club. They killed your underboss. Do you think I was going to tell you I was pregnant? So, your enemies could blow up my babies to get to you?" "No." "I ran. I changed my name. I survived. The revelation hit Lorenzo like a physical blow. The absolute truth in her words tore away his anger, leaving only a profound, sickening guilt. She was right. Had she stayed, had she told him, the Costellos would have hunted them down. But the reality that he had missed the birth of his children, their first steps, their first words, it ignited a possessive, dark fury deep within his soul. "Excuse me," a cold, aristocratic voice interrupted. Lorenzo turned his head to see Chloe marching across the grass, her designer heels sinking into the mud. Her face was a mask of polite indignation, but her eyes were calculating and vicious. She stopped beside Lorenzo, looking Sophia up and down with blatant disgust before her gaze landed on the triplets. Chloe was a politician's daughter. She could read a room, and she could certainly read a face. She saw Lorenzo's gray eyes in the little boy, and the truth clicked into place immediately. "Lorenzo," Chloe said, her voice laced with venom masquerading as confusion. "Who is this person? And why are we stopping our walk for a charity case?" Sophia bristled, her maternal instincts flaring. "I'm leaving," she said to Lorenzo, ignoring Chloe entirely. She shoved the stroller hard, trying to bypass him. "You're not going anywhere," Lorenzo said softly, but the tone brokered zero argument. "Lorenzo, we have a lunch reservation," Chloe insisted, grabbing his bicep. She was smart enough to know that these children were a massive threat. An illegitimate Mafia heir was a problem. 3 of them was a disaster for her future status. Let the woman and her brats go. "She clearly doesn't want to speak to you." Lorenzo didn't look at his fiancée. He simply shrugged his arm, a forceful, sharp movement that dislodged Chloe's grip and sent her stumbling back a half step. "Silas," Lorenzo commanded, not taking his eyes off Sophia. Instantly, the massive bodyguard was at his side. "Boss, bring the SUV around to the north entrance. Right now." Lorenzo then turned his full, terrifying attention back to the mother of his children. "You have been surviving, Sophia. I respect that. But the game has changed. You are not walking away from me again. You and my children are coming with me." "I will scream," Sophia threatened, her voice shaking. "I will scream for the police." Lorenzo leaned in, his face inches from hers. He could smell the faint scent of vanilla that had haunted his dreams for years. "Scream all you want, Mia Luz. Half the cops in this precinct are on my payroll. The other half are terrified of me. You are coming home." He gently but firmly pried her hands off the stroller handle. Sophia let out a choked sob, realizing she was entirely outmatched. As Lorenzo pushed the stroller forward toward the awaiting armored vehicle, leaving his stunned, furious fiancée standing alone in the mud, he knew one thing for certain. A new war was about to begin. And this time, he was fighting for blood. The black, bulletproof SUV glided through the wrought iron gates of Lorenzo's sprawling Lake Forest estate, the heavy steel doors clanging shut behind them like the jaws of a trap. For Sophia, the luxurious compound complete with manicured hedges, a sprawling limestone mansion, and armed guards patrolling the perimeter was nothing short of a high-security prison. Inside the massive foyer, the tension was thick enough to choke on. The triplets, oblivious to the dangerous power dynamics at play, were instantly captivated by the sheer scale of the place. Little Mia waddled toward a priceless Ming vase, prompting Silas to lunge forward with surprising gentleness to redirect her toward a plush velvet sofa. Leo and Mateo, the 2 boys, stared up at the vaulted, frescoed ceiling in awe. Sophia stood frozen in the center of the marble floor, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. "I'll have Mrs. Gable prepare the east wing for you and the children," Lorenzo said, stripping off his leather gloves. His tone was strictly business, a coping mechanism to mask the chaotic storm of emotions raging behind his gray eyes. "It's secure. No one gets in or out without my authorization." "I am not your prisoner, Lorenzo," Sophia said, her voice shaking but her amber eyes blazing with an unyielding fire. "You can't just kidnap us. I have a job. I have a life. I have neighbors who will notice we are missing." "I've already had Silas handle your landlord and your employer," Lorenzo replied smoothly, pouring 2 fingers of scotch from a crystal decanter on a side table. "As far as they know, Sophia Bennett had a family emergency and had to relocate immediately. Your belongings are being packed as we speak." Sophia gasped, the reality of his absolute control washing over her. "You are a monster. You haven't changed at all. You just take whatever you want. Consequences be damned. Lorenzo stopped, his hand tightening around the crystal glass until his knuckles turned white. He slammed the glass down on the table, the sharp clack echoing through the cavernous hall and making the children jump. I am trying to keep you alive, Lorenzo roared, the meticulously maintained facade finally cracking. He closed the distance between them in 2 strides, his towering frame casting a dark shadow over her. Do you think my enemies won't find out about them? Do you think the Costellos wouldn't slit their throats just to send me a message? You hid my blood from me, Sophia, my heirs. You stole 4 years of their lives from me. Do not lecture me on consequences. Tears finally spilled over Sophia's lashes, tracking hot and fast down her cheeks. I did what I had to do to survive the hell you left me in. The raw pain in her voice shattered the last of his anger. Lorenzo's expression softened, the ruthless syndicate boss melting away to reveal the broken man who had spent 4 years haunting his own life. Slowly, tentatively, he raised a hand and wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. I know, he whispered, his voice incredibly gentle, and I will spend the rest of my life making it up to you. But right now, you are staying here, because out there, you are dead. While Lorenzo and Sophia navigated the minefield of their shattered past, a different kind of war was brewing in the heart of downtown Chicago. Chloe Harrison paced the floor of a dimly lit, private VIP room at the Drake Hotel. Her blood boiled with a toxic mixture of humiliation and fury. Lorenzo had left her standing in the mud of Lincoln Park like a discarded accessory. He had humiliated her, and by extension, Senator William Harrison. In Chloe's world of old money and political ruthlessness, humiliation was a capital offense. The heavy mahogany door clicked open, and Arthur Costello slipped into the room. He was an older man, sharp-featured and impeccably dressed, with a reputation for sadism that made even seasoned criminals flinch. The Costello family had been bleeding territory to Lorenzo for years. They were desperate. Miss Harrison, Arthur purred, pouring himself a drink from the courtesy bar. To what do I owe the pleasure? I assumed you were busy planning the wedding of the century. The wedding is off, Chloe spat, her perfectly manicured nails digging into her palms. Lorenzo has found a distraction, a former mistress, and she has 3 brats that look exactly like him. Arthur stopped pouring. The silence in the room became incredibly heavy. Lorenzo Bianchi has children? A slow, wicked smile spread across the older man's face. Well, the Iron King has a soft underbelly after all. I want him ruined, Arthur. Chloe stepped closer, her eyes flashing with venom. My father provided him with the zoning permits and the police protection. We made him legitimate. If he thinks he can toss me aside for some clinic nurse, he is gravely mistaken. And what exactly are you offering me, little bird? Arthur asked, his dark eyes gleaming with predatory interest. Chloe reached into her designer handbag and pulled out a small, encrypted flash drive. Lorenzo's security chief, Silas, rotates the perimeter codes for the Lake Forest estate every 48 hours. As his fiancée, I was given the master override for emergencies. This drive contains the backdoor access to the estate's surveillance and automated gate locks. Tomorrow night, Lorenzo is supposed to be at the docks for a shipment. He will leave the woman and the children at the house with a skeleton crew. Arthur took the flash drive, his smile widening into a terrifying grin. You are a very dangerous woman, Chloe. Just make sure the nurse and her bastards disappear, Chloe said coldly, and leave Lorenzo alive long enough to know he lost everything. The next evening, a suffocating tension blanketed the Lake Forest estate. A massive thunderstorm had rolled in off Lake Michigan, pounding the mansion with sheets of rain and cracking thunder that rattled the antique windows. Upstairs in the East Wing, Sophia had finally managed to get the triplets to sleep. The sheer emotional exhaustion of the last 2 days had drained her. She walked out into the dimly lit hallway, wrapping a thick cashmere cardigan around her shoulders, only to find Lorenzo leaning against the wall, watching the door to the nursery. He hadn't gone to the docks. I thought you had business tonight, Sophia said softly, keeping her distance. I sent Silas to handle it, Lorenzo replied, his voice a low rumble. He pushed off the wall and walked toward her. I couldn't leave, not with the storm, not with... He gestured vaguely toward the nursery. I wanted to be here. Sophia crossed her arms. They are resilient. They would have been fine. I wasn't talking about them, Lorenzo said, his intense gaze locking onto hers. I was talking about you. Before Sophia could process the heavy implication of his words, the impossible happened. The power in the mansion abruptly cut out, plunged into total darkness. The only illumination came from the violent flashes of lightning outside. Crucially, the backup generators, which should have kicked in within 3 seconds, remained dead. The sophisticated, multi-million-dollar security alarms were dead silent. Lorenzo's posture instantly shifted from a man seeking redemption to an apex predator. He grabbed Sophia by the arm, pulling her hard against his chest. "Don't make a sound," he hissed in her ear. He drew a heavy, matte black, suppressed pistol from his shoulder holster. The fact that the generators were disabled meant an inside job. Someone had bypassed the master codes. Chloe. The realization hit Lorenzo like a freight train. He had underestimated the politician's daughter. "Lorenzo, what's happening?" Sophia whispered, panic threading her voice as she instinctively pulled away to rush toward the nursery. "Costello," Lorenzo answered grimly. He shoved her gently but firmly into the nursery and followed her inside, locking the heavy oak door. "Get the kids under the heavy oak cribs. Do not come out until I tell you to." Downstairs, the sound of breaking glass echoed over the thunder. Heavy, tactical footsteps breached the foyer. Arthur Costello hadn't sent a hitman. He had sent a heavily armed hit squad. "There are too many of them, Lorenzo," Sophia choked out, scooping up a sleeping Mia while frantically motioning for the boys to crawl beneath the solid wood furniture. "You can't fight them all alone." Lorenzo knelt beside her in the dark room, illuminated only by a flash of lightning. He pressed his forehead against hers, the physical contact grounding them both amidst the chaos. "4 years ago, I let you go because I didn't think I could protect you. I will never make that mistake again. You are my heart, Sophia. You and these children. No one touches what is mine." He kissed her a hard, desperate, bruising kiss that tasted of salt and gunpowder before ripping himself away and slipping out the nursery door, locking her inside. The hallway was pitch black. Lorenzo moved with lethal, silent precision. He knew every blind spot, every creaking floorboard of his home. The intruders were relying on night vision goggles, but they didn't know the terrain. The first 2 Costello men came up the sweeping marble staircase. Lorenzo didn't hesitate. 2 muffled thwips from his suppressed weapon, and both men dropped silently to the carpeted floor. He moved like a ghost, hunting the hunters. Downstairs, he could hear the squad leader barking orders, realizing their men were dropping. "Burn the house down," a voice yelled from the living room. "Smoke the rats out." Lorenzo's blood ran cold. If they started a fire, Sophia and the children would be trapped on the 2nd floor. He abandoned stealth. Kicking open the double doors to the balcony overlooking the grand living room, Lorenzo opened fire. He rained down a precise, merciless hail of bullets on the 5 men below. The room erupted into chaos, muzzle flashes illuminating the expensive artwork and shattered crystal. Lorenzo took a grazing shot to his ribs, the burning pain barely registering through his massive adrenaline spike. He dropped 3 more men before his slide locked back. Empty. As he ducked behind the stone balustrade to reload, the front doors of the mansion blew open with explosive force. Silas stood in the doorway, soaked to the bone, flanked by a dozen of Lorenzo's most heavily armed enforcers. "Boss!" Silas roared over the gunfire. "Wipe them out!" Lorenzo ordered from the balcony. The ensuing firefight lasted less than 60 seconds. Caught between Lorenzo above and Silas's tactical team below, the Costello squad was decimated. When the smoke cleared and the emergency backup lights finally flickered on, Lorenzo slowly descended the stairs, his hand pressing against the bleeding wound on his side. "Secure the perimeter. Clean up this mess," Lorenzo ordered Silas, who was already kicking weapons away from the bodies. "And Silas? Send a team to Senator Harrison's residence. Drag Chloe Harrison and her father out of their beds. They are no longer off limits. Consider it done, boss." Silas nodded grimly. Lorenzo turned and sprinted back up the stairs, his heart pounding faster now than it had during the gunfight. He unlocked the nursery door and pushed it open. Sophia was huddled in the corner, clutching the triplets tightly to her chest. They were crying. terrified by the loud noises, but they were completely unharmed. Seeing him standing there, covered in soot and bleeding but alive, Sofia let out a broken sob. She let go of the children and threw herself into Lorenzo's arms, burying her face in his chest. Lorenzo dropped his weapon, wrapping his massive arms around her, burying his face in her dark hair. "It's over," he whispered fiercely, kissing the top of her head. "They're gone. It's over." As Leo, Matteo, and Mia cautiously crawled out from under the crib, toddling over to grab onto Lorenzo's pant legs, he looked down at the family he had almost lost. The Mafia boss who had once ruled Chicago with cold, isolated ruthlessness finally realized his true strength. He wasn't just a king anymore. He was a father. And heaven help anyone who ever tried to take his crown or his queen again. Did Lorenzo's ruthless devotion and Sofia's fierce maternal instincts leave you breathless? If you loved this intense mafia romance full of dark twists, betrayals, and unbreakable family bonds, don't forget to hit that like button. Share this story with your fellow drama lovers, and subscribe to our channel for more thrilling, real-life-inspired audio stories every week. Turn on notifications so you never miss a chapter.